is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. 16 United States senators will retire this year. There's always a pretty big turnover in this body of 100, but that's a lot of senators at once, and we're losing an enormous amount of talent. And of course, we're gaining a lot of talent in the new senators who are coming in. I wanted to take a few minutes just to show my respect for those who have served, which I'll do in a very summary fashion because we're talking about 16 individuals with very complex and distinguished backgrounds. One might ask, what are the characteristics of a United States Senator? And there are a lot of different answers to that depending on your background and attitude toward politics and government, I suppose. And I've always thought that one characteristic of almost every member of the United States Senate is that he or she probably was a first grader sitting on the front row with his or her hand in the air waiting to be recognized. This is an eager bunch, or you wouldn't have gotten here. Second, it's a group of risk takers. Most people who end up in the United States Senate get there because a lot of other people who want to be senators were standing around waiting for the right time to run. There are a lot of people who are elected here who had no chance of winning at the time they decided to run, and the voters decided differently, and here they are. A third characteristic of United States senators is we, I should say, are almost professionally congenial. That's a big help because it's almost a requirement in an organization of 100 individuals who spend almost all of their time with one another, who serve in a body that operates by unanimous consent when just one senator can bring the whole place to a halt, and whose job basically is to argue about some of the most difficult issues that face the American people. So it helps that almost every member of the United States Senator is an especially congenial person. People often say to me back in Tennessee, boy, it must be rough being in that job. They're awfully mean up there. You know, the truth is I don't know of a more congenial group of men and women than the members of the United States Senate. I mean, we begin the day in the gym. The next thing you know, we're at prayer breakfast. Then we're at a committee hearing. Then we're on the floor voting. Then we have lunch. It goes all the way through the day until 7 or 8 o'clock. We live together, and we get along very, very well. We know each other and respect each other. The presiding officer and I had dinner one night with our wives, and we were lamenting a little bit the loss of families who know one another in the way that happened when his parents and family were serving here and when I first came here with Senator Baker, and that's true, we've lost some of that. But still, there's an enormous amount of affection and goodwill here. You don't get to be really close friends in this job, but you do get to be very good acquaintances, and you learn to respect people for their strengths and their individuals. Senator Domenici said when he left that we don't do a very good job of saying goodbye here, and that's true. So, and as one part of saying goodbye, I would like to say just one good thing about each one of the 16 retiring senators. Much more could be said, but I've selected just one thing, and mostly I'll go in alphabetical order. Senator Bob Bennett of Utah. I've known him the longest. We served together in the Nixon administration. I was in the White House working with Bryce Harlow, and he was in the Department of Transportation. That was in 1969 and 1970. But what I will remember about Bob Bennett, and most senators will about his legacy here, are his careful expositions of economic issues. He has a background as an entrepreneur and a businessman. He served with distinction on the Joint Economic Committee, and his expertise in understanding the economy and letting us know where we are has been invaluable. Senator Evan Bayh, he's one of 4 governors who are leaving the Senate. I feel that loss especially because I think the more governors, the better. That's a little bit of a parochial attitude on my part, but governors have to come to results and are used to working across party lines. I'd like for us to do more of that. Governor Bayh has served 2 terms here as a United States Senator. Still young, obviously has a long career ahead of him in whatever direction he chooses to go. What I'll remember most about Evan Bayh is the civility and bipartisanship that he's shown here on numerous occasions, both professionally and as an individual, as a courtesy to me as an individual senator. Senator Kit Bond, another governor. He and I once served as law clerks on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal for two judges who helped integrate the South, Judges Tuttle and Wisdom. Senator Bayh has a great many things that could be said about him, but what most of us admired greatly about his time here was his devotion to our intelligence community and national security. As vice chairman of our Intelligence Committee, making sure that our intelligence agencies have the tools they need to prevent terrorist attacks on America. Senator Sam Brownback is going the other way, from senator to governor of Kansas. During the health care debate, I often said that everyone who voted for the health care law ought to be sentenced to serve as governor for 2 terms and try to implement it. Well, Senator Brownback voted against the health care law, but he's going home and he'll have the opportunity to enjoy all those unfunded mandates on Medicaid and see how Kansas deals with it. But what we'll miss about Sam Brownback here, in addition to his extraordinary kindness as a human being, is his devotion to human rights, giving voice to the oppressed millions in North Korea and being outspoken critic of genocide in Darfur. Senator Jim Bunning. Everybody knows about Jim Bunning and baseball. Nobody who knows Jim Bunning would want to be a batter when he's throwing pitches. We can easily understand how he's the only person ever to strike Ted Williams out 3 times. But what not as many people know about is that Jim Bunning has been a persistent leader in fighting for sick nuclear workers who served our country during the 50s and the 60s and were sick because of their work in handling nuclear weapons and other matters. So Jim Bunning deserves the thanks of all of the families of the sick nuclear workers in America for his service here. Senator Chris Dodd, children and families are Chris Dodd's hallmark and his legacy. He's been here a long time, 6 terms, I think, but I've felt privileged to work with him on the same subcommittee on children and families. He's focused on premature births, specifically, and a whole variety of other legislation. We'll also miss his congeniality, his good humor, and his devotion to the Senate as an institution, making sure that it stays unique as a place where we have unlimited amendment and unlimited debate so the voices of the American people can be heard. Senator Byron Dorgan, I once heard our chaplain say that there was no better storyteller in the Senate. He didn't mean he was making up stories, he just meant he was good at taking what he figured out was the truth and explaining it in ways the rest of us could understand. I've especially enjoyed working with him on legislation that would make it easier to introduce electric cars and trucks in our country to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. Senator Russ Feingold will be remembered for his strong stands, sometimes solitary stands, such as when he voted against the Patriot Act, such as when he went to work early on campaign finance. I thank him for our work together on the Africa Subcommittee, where he has been during his whole time here. There's no better United States Senator than Judd Gregg on either side of the aisle. One indication of that is the last 3 leaders of the Republicans in the Senate have asked him to sit in leadership meetings just to get his wisdom and advice. He doesn't say too much, but what he says we all pay attention to. And he's been the voice of our party, and we believe the voice of Americans who are concerned about fiscal responsibility, about spending, and about too much debt. Senator Blanche Lincoln has been a pioneer throughout her career in public life as a staff member, then as a senator, occupying Senator Caraway's seat, first woman to be elected to the Senate. Blanche was the youngest woman ever to be elected to the Senate and left her mark with the passage of the 2008 Farm Bill. Arlen Specter from Pennsylvania. The word to describe Arlen is courage. The other word is survivor, and they both go together. Arlen has had a distinguished career from his youngest days. He was a member of the Warren Commission investigating President Kennedy's assassination, and here his work has spanned the entire mark. One of the things I appreciate both about Senator and Mrs. Specter is their work on Constitution Hall in Philadelphia, which is such an example of living history. Senator George Voinovich has been a mayor and a governor and a senator, a strong voice in defense of federalism, but federal workers have George Voinovich to thank for years of attention to issues involving federal employees that most of us were too busy to pay attention to. There have been 4 members appointed to the Senate. That's quite a number who are retiring. Senator Kaufman of Delaware, who's been a great teacher, a staff member, and now senator. Senator Lemieux of Florida, who's made his focus balancing the budget and controlling the debt. We haven't heard the last of George Lemieux, I'm sure, in politics. Senator Burris of Illinois, a state controller, his own man, who has completed an outstanding career in public service by being here, and Senator Cart Goodwin, the youngest senator who replaced the oldest, and Senator Byrd, and who's only been here for a few months, but we've greatly enjoyed having him. So, Mr. President, it's been my privilege to serve with these 16 senators. We thank them for their service to our country. They've had a chance to serve in what we regard as the world's greatest deliberative body, a very special institution. We'll greatly miss their leadership, and we hope they'll stay in touch with us because they are not just retiring senators, they're all our friends. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.